Hello and welcome to this Philbert Flies review of ORBX's Newcastle scenery for Microsoft Flight Simulator. You join me here on approach to runway 25 at Newcastle, and I'm starting with an approach, as always, to give you a little look at the surrounding area and also to give you the chance to gauge the performance of this scenery on my system, which is comprised of an i7-8700K processor, 32GB of RAM and a 1080 Ti graphics card. I'll let you watch the approach and landing in peace, and because we have another short taxi in today, I'll let you watch that too. And I will speak to you again at a gate when we'll have a good look around this scenery in different weather and lighting conditions, and I'll finish up by giving you my opinion on it. Speak to you shortly.
500. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5.
Welcome to Newcastle. We're parked up here at gate 3 and we'll just watch the jetway connect and then we'll begin our tour of the airport. So this is a custom model jetway, as you can see. And it's done an alright job of connecting. It has gone through the skin of the aircraft, which isn't the best we've seen, but certainly seen plenty worse. Looking at the jetway itself, the texture quality for this advertising on the side of it is a little on the low side. We've got a bit of pixelation around the text, and again, I've definitely seen better. But it is nice to see the effort they've gone to include this custom signage. Over the other side of the jetway, I can't help but mention the absolute carnage that's going on with the with the baggage belt and the baggage trolleys here. I don't know what that's all about, but I think we can safely blame Asobo rather than ORBX for that one. And it was quite nice to have a marshaller guiding us into the stand, even if he and the pushback tug just popped in apropos of nothing. So let's take a look at the quality of the modelling and the texturing. I have to say, so far I am very, very impressed with both. We've got a really good level of detail on the side of this pier here, a good amount of weathering, and a good amount of texture as well, with these lumps and bumps and imperfections in the metal. On the roof as well, the story is much the same. Very detailed roof textures, and it's very nice to see these structures, which I presume have something to do with air conditioning, but I wouldn't bet money on it. The actual corrugation of the building is a flat texture. There isn't any 3D to it. But that doesn't matter because it looks very, very good. You'll notice that the windows are reflective. They do use PBR materials. But unfortunately, we don't have any interior modelling here. We just have flat textures. Not the end of the world, in my opinion, when they look as good as these do. So this level of quality carries all the way along the pier, and you'll notice we've got a good amount of ground clutter as well, a lot of vehicles parked underneath and around the building, which bring a lot of life to the airport. As is the norm for ORBX, they've included 1 or 2 static aircraft in this scenery. But in my opinion, they haven't overdone it. There's plenty of room to park, but as I say every time, it would really be nice to have the option to turn them off. The modelling and texturing on the main terminal building are every bit as good as what we saw on the pier. Again, we have super crisp textures and some nice weathering on the building's sides. The roof too looks very good, with plenty of detail, and again, it's not a uniform texture. There are bits of dirt, there are pock marks. It looks very, very nice. You'll also notice we've got an animated radar on this part of the roof, which is very nice to see, a nice little extra touch that I wouldn't necessarily have expected. And if we move down to the landside face of the building, you'll see this is done pretty well too. We have cars parked outside the front, we do have a properly textured roadway, and we've got a really nice looking canopy, which again is not uniform, which makes it look all the more realistic. You'll see we've got a really good amount of detail on the main terminal entrance here, with a nice 3D sign, some pretty good signage showing domestic arrivals, and departures over here. Not the sharpest if you get super close, but good enough for me. I'm very impressed by the level of detail in the car park. The cars are nicely modelled and well textured with reflective windows, and the ground surfaces are nice and crisp. If you go and have a look at these 2 buses here, you'll see that they too have custom liveries, which, to be honest, the developer needn't have bothered with. It's a nice little extra touch. They could just as easily have used generic buses, and I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid. But it's a very good sign, in my opinion, that they have gone that extra mile. The level of detail on some of the peripheral buildings away from the main terminal is just incredible. Take a look at this building over here, for example. It seems to be an old control tower and perhaps some administrative offices. I'm not entirely sure. But have a look at that tile work and the quality of the textures. It's really impressive stuff. And even the roof is done to an incredibly high standard. I really like these patches of these puddles of water on the roof here which reflect the light. And the general grime and dirt and the sharpness of everything is very, very impressive. The old control tower itself also looks very, very good, with a good level of grime around the windows and general weathering, which makes it look very, very lifelike indeed. That said, I do have one little moan over here, and that is about the fence. See, you can barely see it from a long distance away, but here it is. You can see we've just got some barbed wire on the top and some wire mesh that doesn't even touch the ground. There are no posts, there are no structures, it's not supported by anything. Now, I don't know when I became so obsessed with fencing, but we are where we are, so you're going to have to listen to me, I'm afraid. And this airport was designed and built by the same ORBX Havant team that did Dundee, whose fence I was so impressed with. So for me, and probably me alone, that's a little bit of a disappointment. I don't imagine any of the rest of you will ever notice this. The main control tower, which is set away from the terminal over in the background there, is absolutely beautiful. I've never seen one quite like it. I don't know when it was built, I don't know much about the history, but it was clearly sponsored by Emirates. Again, we don't have an interior, we don't have any transparent glass, but I don't think it matters because it just looks superb. In fact, the amount of detail that ORBX have put into the areas away from the main terminal in general is very, very impressive. Just have a look at this fire station and offshore rescue training facility. It's really interesting. I've never seen anywhere quite like this. And it's incredibly realistic. Superb texturing, superb modelling. Just a really interesting place to have a nose around in a drone, to be honest. Never mind the flight simulation. On the south side of the runway we have the GA apron and the maintenance area. And I have to say, very good fence, ORBX. I'm impressed by that. The hedge, not so much, a little bit boxy. But that's a very minor point, it must be said. Have a look at the quality of these buildings over here. Again, every bit as well modelled and textured as the main terminal, which is really nice to see. More very good fencing. And a huge number of vehicles parked in the maintenance area, which really does, as I always say, bring a huge amount of life to the place. Great job. The ground textures at this airport are very, very good. The ORBX team have matched the materials used and their colours very closely with the real thing. And if you have a look at the Google satellite imagery, you'll notice that even things like the shapes of these grey concrete areas on the stands are absolutely correct. This L shape is correct, as is this rectangle. If I had any criticism, it would be that I would say this asphalt material is slightly too dark. It doesn't look quite that dark in real life, but it's a very, very minor nitpick, I have to say. If I was going to carry along with this nitpicking, I would also point out that the yellows don't match. The text here is a different shade of yellow to the lines. And I would also say that perhaps the ground markings stand out a little bit too much. This red looks quite unnatural to me. But, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about that in day-to-day usage. The taxiways look really good, with nice detailed taxiway centerline lights and some lovely little features like these crack repairs over here, which really add an extra level of realism to things. The taxiway signs have also been very well modelled. If you have a look at this one, you'll see it's nice and crisp and easy to read. The runway looks really good. Again, the colour matches its real-world counterpart perfectly, as does the amount of rubber along the centre line. You'll notice that we do have extra rubber marks around the touchdown zone, just like the real thing has, and the markings are 100% accurate as well. And the grassy areas look really good as well, with a good variety of tones and thicknesses of grass, and good use of 3D foliage. It looks very, very lifelike indeed. And here's Newcastle at night. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Now, we do, of course, have to rely on flat textures to give the impression of a terminal interior, but this is one of the better uses that I've seen of these. They're nice and bright, we have a reasonable level of detail of what's going on inside, and they look sharp. They look sharp enough when you pull up to an aircraft, and even when you get as close as I am now, they don't look blurry by any means. The apron floodlighting is very nice, with the static aircraft lit up, as you can see, by these floodlights. And our aircraft over on the other side there it's a little bit in the dark, but I've no reason to doubt the validity of the lighting here. I'm sure they have researched it well. The main terminal building looks pretty good as well. We've got a nice lit up Welcome to Newcastle International sign. And again, the interior textures look pretty good. The landside entrance to the airport looks okay at night. It's not amazing, but it's passable. The signage looks really good. These textures up here look pretty good. It's just these right out the front that, to me, don't look terribly realistic. The car park's well lit, as are some of these buildings surrounding it, such as whatever this is, and the petrol station over here. So overall, a pretty good job, I'd say. The floodlighting on the remote stand somehow doesn't look as good to me as the night lighting on the stands nearest the terminal. I haven't been able to find any images to compare this to, so it may be perfectly accurate, but to me it just looks a little bit dark and like there isn't quite enough lighting. But, you know, that's just my opinion and it is subjective. The taxiway centerline lighting looks very good. And the runway lighting looks very good as well. I have to say I'd expected slightly more from that fantastic control tower. Again, I haven't been able to find any photos of it at night, and I've got no reason to think that this isn't fairly accurate. I just would have thought they'd highlight the structure with some uplighters or something like that. If we get in close, you'll see that the night textures aren't the best in these windows, but it's probably good enough for flying past. Just don't come over here in the drone in the pitch black. This is the GA apron at night. You'll see we have taxiway centre lines, but we don't have any floodlights whatsoever. Again, I haven't been able to find any images of this apron in the real world at night, so I can't definitively say there's anything wrong with this, but I find it slightly hard to believe that we don't have any apron lights whatsoever here. Similarly, the textures are passable. They're not as good as those on the main terminal, and if you get close, the windows look very blurry and quite unrealistic. They're also incredibly bright, just like we saw at ORBX Leeds. They're almost pure white, and that to me doesn't look very realistic. We do have, as you will see, some street lamps around the side, and this side of the building and this area in general looks quite a lot better. But that's not much good if you're wanting to fly here in a Cessna at night. Here's the fire station by night, and it's nice to see the fire engine lit up by floodlights, but the window textures here again are a bit disappointing considering how good the ones on the main terminal are. These are very, very low resolution and quite blurry. They don't create the look of a building that's being lit from within. The airport looks very good in the rain. The ground textures do a great job of supporting the default sim reflections and puddles, and it looks very convincing indeed. And this, believe it or not, is what Newcastle looks like in the snow. Now we know that the sim is quite limiting in terms of what developers can do about snow settling, but I've certainly never seen an apron that is completely clear of snow with the exception of the concrete panels in the middle of the stands. It just doesn't look right. So I don't quite know how that's happened, but I'm sure there must be a way around it if the developers put their mind to it. The grassy areas look pretty good. The runway also looks pretty good. We've got a nice amount of snow on the edges, but it's mainly clear, and that to me is very realistic. So that's the saving grace, I would say, for the snow implementation here. So what do I think of ORBX's Newcastle? I think it's very good, but there are a few things letting it down. The modelling and texturing of the buildings is top-notch, lots of detail in the building models and super crisp textures with a great amount of weathering and plenty of accurate-looking imperfections. That old tile building and control tower is truly spectacular, proper Marcus Newberg level stuff. While it would have been nice to see transparent glass, admittedly a conclusion I've only recently come to, I used to be on the fence about this, the window textures on the terminal are among the best I've seen. The ground textures are nice and sharp, but some of the ground markings look a bit too bright and cartoony for my taste. The runway looks fantastic and matches the real one incredibly well. There are a good number of vehicles around the place, and the landside areas are very nicely modelled, all of which helps to bring the airport to life. The night lighting is very good around the main terminal, and the nighttime window textures are fantastic. They really do give a convincing impression of a lit terminal. Away from the main terminal, however, the lighting is mediocre at best, with window textures either looking very blurry or, as we saw around the GA terminal, unnaturally bright. The final bad point? I was very disappointed with the snow. All that said, overall I do really like this airport. My guess is that 95% of people who fly in and out of here will only notice the good bits. There will probably only be snow on the ground for a few days in an average year, so you may well never see it. Similarly, I don't imagine many people will be spending time on the GA apron at night. So while I think it's important as a reviewer to point out the flaws in the product I'm reviewing, I think it's equally important that you, as a potential customer, keep them in perspective. ORBX's Newcastle does look really, really good, almost everywhere, almost all the time. Well, that was a lengthy old conclusion, I'm sorry about that. You'll be pleased to hear we've reached the end. As ever, thank you very much for watching. Please do like the video if you found it useful, subscribe to my channel, and donate if you'd like to. Hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies. Bye bye.